That entire piece came from one basic chord progression and the CAGED system. I sat down, set myself some strict rules and built every part from scratch. And I want to show you exactly how. Because if you're anything like me, you've probably learned your CAGED shapes. Maybe you know a few pentatonic boxes. But when it comes to actually making music with them, it just doesn't click yet. And I think the problem is we never get shown a real process for turning theory into something you'd actually want to play. So in this video, I'm going to walk you through exactly how I built that piece you just heard, step by step, chord by chord. To make this as simple as possible, both for you and for me as I continue to work with CAGED, I think the best thing to do is to constrain yourself. By giving ourselves strict limits for what we're working with, it will allow us to be both creative and further develop our CAGED understanding. If you're completely new to CAGED, then I have a beginner-friendly playlist in the description which will get you up to speed. One of the best places to start with creating a musical part is with a chord progression. This instantly gives us the guardrails for working within. And one of the most widely used chord progressions is the following. This was a very common chord progression, the 1-5-6-4 in the key of C major. It uses the chords C major, G major, A minor and F major. If this idea of chords in a key is new or confusing to you, then I'll link a video at the end of this one to help you out. Played straight ahead, this isn't the most inspiring chord progression. It's more associated with pop music, so if you listen to a lot of rock or blues, it might not be the most appealing thing. But by working with CAGED, I want to show you how you can alter even the blandest pop progression into something more to your style. I'm going to work on each chord individually now, looking at it through the CAGED lens, to start to draw out some musical ideas that I can use. Before we begin, I want to make clear that there's absolutely no shame in taking things slowly. I find it easiest to write things down or note them on the computer as I work through ideas. I've been doing it whilst creating the examples for this video, and it helps massively. You don't have to be able to instantly recall something in order to understand it and use it. It's much better to be slow and precise rather than fast and sloppy. Don't give up on something if it doesn't stick with you straight away. Patience is your friend, whereas speed is often your enemy. Let's start with home bass, C major. And to make things easy to begin with, I'll start by working in open position. If you've watched my CAGED videos in the past, you'll know that I like to pair whole chords with the major or minor pentatonic. This is how I'm going to find notes to work with in my lead guitar part. You can also play these bigger chords as smaller triads. This will allow me to contrast lead parts with fragments of chords to give the guitar a more cohesive sound, spelling out the chord changes. So here's the open C major chord with pentatonic box 4. The beauty of this position is you can play 5 open strings. Open strings have a resonance and overtones that you don't get with fretted notes. So to create a musical part for the first 4 bars, I'm going to focus on these open strings. I want to emphasize the C note to establish it as home of this piece of music. So I create a little riff, which the first and third bars begin with. It uses the open A and D strings, hammering onto the C and E notes respectively. These are the first and third of the C major chord, clearly telling the listener that this is centered in C major. After this, in bar 2, I just continue up to an open G string, another note for the C major chord, and then back down. In bar 4, I continue higher and use an open G string with other scale notes in some pleasing double stops. Let's listen to the complete first 4 bars now. These first 4 bars and much of the rest of the piece use an idea I like to call the same but different. You can repeat riffs or motifs many times so that they sound familiar, but each time just change something small so it adds variety. In this example, I kept the beginning the same and changed the end, but you can also use the same notes and change the rhythm, or keep the rhythm and change the notes. This is where your musical creativity comes into play. Okay, now let's move on to the G major 5 chord with bars 5 to 8. For these 2 bars, I'm pulling my ideas from the G major bar chord at the 3rd fret, which pairs with pentatonic box 2. One of the best things I've learned since coming back to the guitar is how to use triads. These are just cut down versions of bigger chords, which you find within the larger chord shapes from the CAGED system. I go into more detail about this in the playlist in the description. So here with the G major bar, you can just play the D, G and B string notes in a simple little diagonal shape. This forms the heart of the part of the music, clearly spelling out the G major chord to the listener. Then I follow this with a quick slide from 1 fret up into 2 notes from the pentatonic box 2. This 1 fret slide sounds interesting and grabs the ear. That's because the starting point isn't actually in the scale, but quick 1 fret slides like this are great for adding variety to any note you're landing on in the pentatonic scale. Then in bars 7 and 8 I use a common rock and roll type phrase from box 2 before resolving down the G major triad shape again to rest on the root note of G. This gives a very calm, pleasing resolution to this phrase. Now onto the A minor 6 chord in bars 9 to 12. Here I'm using mainly an idea from pentatonic box 5, which in the CAGED system pairs with the G minor shape chord. The interesting thing about C major and A minor is that they are relative scales. That means they share the same notes. So in order to guide the listener to which one you are playing in, you need to focus more on the root note, either A or C. This is called the tonal centre and will make your music feel either more major or minor with the same set of notes. In these 4 bars I reinforce the A note as the tonal centre by constantly playing the open A string. This is known as a drone note. Then along with this I play notes from the pentatonic box 5 in pairs on the D and G strings, sliding them up from the 2nd fret to the 5th. I repeat this cool riff feel for all the bars. This is the first example where I have only drawn inspiration from the pentatonic box and not the chord shape. Once again, it's up to you what approach you take. This is all about musical creativity. Moving on to the final chord in the progression now and the end of the first part of my musical idea. This will use the F major chord played with the D shape at the 3rd fret along with pentatonic box 3. Here I start with a lesser used power chord shape starting on the D string. I play this up and down and then slide down from the 5th fret G string to the 2nd fret within pentatonic box 3. Then in the second half of this I play up into a high inverted triad. This is like a D major open chord shape and slides up and down the fretboard nicely. I follow this with a couple of notes from pentatonic box 3 to finish on the F note. So that's the first half of my musical idea. It kind of gently spells out the chord progression, blending triads and pentatonic ideas. But what if you want something with a harder edge, something more rocky? Well, in the second half I'll add some gain and reach for something stronger. To do this, I'll increase the rate of chord change. This will immediately feel like the music has sped up. We'll still be following along with the same progression as before though, so you can see how the same chords can be interpreted in different ways. And for the next 8 bars, my focus is going to be on power chords, starting with the C power chord at the 3rd fret, followed by a nice simple idea with a bend from pentatonic box 1. Then onto the G power chord matched with a lick from pentatonic box 2. If you remember back to the previous G major idea earlier in the piece, I was in exactly the same position with the same pentatonic box. So this will show you the variety of ideas you can get from the same position. Then it's time for the A power chord at the 5th fret. This is to take the place of the A minor chord. To go with this, I repeat the same riff in the same position from the C power chord section that you heard earlier. If you recall, A minor and C major scales share the same notes. So by repeating this here, I hope you can hear how the same idea repeated with different chords will take on a different feel. Then I simply slide down into the F power chord at the 3rd fret. I palm mute this, gradually adding the high octave F note and reducing palm muting to add intensity. This then leads into the final 8 bars, where I go into a guitar solo. The idea for the solo part is to climb up the neck to add drama and a crescendo for the song. I didn't plan exactly what I was going to play here, but I used the following guidelines. I changed position every 2 bars along with the same chord progression. Each time I shifted to a different pentatonic box from the relevant scale. So first up is C major pentatonic box 1 at the 5th fret, then G major pentatonic box 4 at the 7th fret, followed by A minor pentatonic box 3 at the 10th fret, and finally F major pentatonic box 1 at the 10th fret. At the beginning of each change in box, I made sure to start on the root note of the relevant chord in order to guide the listener along. I then end the whole thing with a high C major triad at the 12th fret to resolve the piece. Now I've explained all of my decisions, here's the whole piece played with a backing track. Listen out for the chord changes and the parts to go with them. Also note how the supporting bass and keys add a subtle difference to how the guitar played over the top sounds. Now that you've seen how I took a simple 1-5-6-4 progression and used the CAGED system to turn it into something musical, there's one missing piece that we kind of skipped over. How do you even know which chords belong in a key in the first place? Watch this next video where I'll show you a ridiculously simple system to instantly find and play the right chords in any major key so you can stop guessing and start creating with total confidence.